Hi, happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to our ŌNCE Club in conversation with. Today we have the wonderful Stephen Jones, who is a milliner extraordinaire, if you will. Who's joining us, and it's an absolute pleasure to have him. If you are unaware, Stephen Jones has been in the industry over, I believe, 4 decades. He's worked with everyone from from Dior to Mick Jagger to the Royals. He is quite Vivienne Westwood, even quite synonymous with some of the most amazing runways that you may be aware of. And today we are very humbled and very honored to have him sit down with us and give us some insight into his illustrious career. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here on this Friday afternoon here in London. Anyway.
I know. Hopefully the sun will come out for you soon. It's just got in for me, so maybe it's coming.
Oh, it's pouring down with rain here in South London.
Absolutely. So for those who have never joined us for In Conversation With or are unaware with what ŌNCE Club is, it's a great community platform for the personal shopping and styling community, and we are endeavoring to essentially build a place that you can connect and collaborate with like-minded people, and also have great access to brands and industry experts alike that will hopefully support your career development and business development in whichever way you so wish. And this is just one of the many ways in which that we are bringing this type of context. So today we're going to talk to Stephen about his career, and we'll open up for questions towards the end. So if you do want to ask Stephen anything, please feel free to write those in the Q&A section. So Stephen, I am, like I said, I'm a huge fan of your work. You've worked with some of the most amazing designers. I suppose people always want to know sort of, how did you get started? You know, did you know that hats were going to be your calling? What was
Absolutely not. I mean, I think it's funny, when you're younger, you imagine that you know, you have this career, and you know, you go to college, you're good at maths, so you go and study maths at college or university, and you become an accountant, and you know, it's very directional. I mean, I think later on in life you realize that life for most people is not like that at all, and they do all sorts of different things, and that's what makes life interesting too. I mean, some people really have an ambition and go and do and get that, but you know, in the 60s, growing up as a little boy, I wanted to be an astronaut. Didn't quite get there. I've made hats like spaceships, but not exactly. But basically, you know, I was good at art, and I got in by complete chance to what's Central St Martin's now, but St Martin's School of Art, in the days that it wasn't particularly well known for fashion. When I went there, I mean, nowadays everybody says in the fashion world, oh, Central St Martin's is the place. When I was there, it was really the place for sculpture, and there were only 4 courses. There was sculpture and painting and graphics and fashion, and it was bang right in central London in Charing Cross Road. And coming from Liverpool and wanting, even though I sort of love Liverpool, at that time I wanted to get out of there as fast as possible, follow my elder sister to London, who I thought was having this sort of glamorous, fabulous lifestyle. I mean, I think she was a bit, but you know, she was living in a flat and, you know, doing elder sister type things. And when I arrived there, you know, I'd been at boarding school in Liverpool, and I didn't know what on earth to do. So you can imagine my tailoring was appalling. And my tailoring tutor took pity on me, and I became an intern in his couture house that he actually owned, and he taught like 1 day a week. And so I was making coffee and picking up the pins in the tailoring workroom, and next to the tailoring workroom was a millinery workroom. And I was fascinated, not so much by the hats, but really by the milliners. They were all ladies of a certain age, or so I thought. I mean, they must have been at least 40. The arrogance of an 18-year-old. When you're 18, you think somebody who's 25 is really past it.
Absolutely.
So, you know, they were definitely of a different generation, but, you know, the great thing about them is they worked hard and they played hard. It seemed to me as though they had chosen what they really wanted to do, as opposed to having this big career plan. And they were just nice people and they seemed to love it. And I transferred from one department to another, from the tailoring to millinery. And it was a bit of a eureka moment. I realized that was the thing that I really enjoyed. But at college, I was doing women's wear. So when I left Central St. Martin's, I mean, I was showing women's clothes and making hats as well. Mm-hmm. And then, did I realize it was my calling? Not really, but I think everybody around me did. Right. That's the funny thing. And, you know, when I speak to students, I always say, you know, you can't do it yourself. Like your family, your friends, your partner, whoever, so you almost need to do it with you, because sometimes it's just too much to do yourself. And if you're trying to sort of stride out by yourself, you need all their support, because at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, you're going to be calling them to say, give us a hand. When you can't afford to pay your phone bill, you know, it's probably your mum who's going to help you out. So it's a group effort. I'm not saying that you always have to have their blessing, but it's a bit like a marriage. You know, they don't have to, your family don't have to like the other person, but it's a hell of a lot easier if they do.
I love that. I love that. And, you know, as you're refining your skills and you're kind of obviously finding a way and everyone's clearly telling you this is what you should be doing, at what stage do you sort of start to feel like you can break out on your own and sort of set up your own studio and workshop?
That happened to me in a really weird way, but in a fabulous way. I'd left college. I'd had to move back to my parents' house. I couldn't afford a flat in London anymore. And I asked, you know, for a loan, and it was like, no. You're back here. And whereas nowadays, you know, so many students have to live with their parents because that's the only way they can exist. Certainly for my generation, you know, we were back in the olden days on grants. We had grants, so we weren't in huge debt. We were very lucky. The student system was very different. And I was coming back to London and going to clubs, and I was a bit of a club kid, and in a funny way still am, even though a bit past it. And I was going to this club called the Blitz Club, which was run by this guy called Steve Strange. And it's so funny because we were just doing what came naturally. Now, through modern times and the internet and everything, this time is sort of celebrated and sort of seen as a time which was extraordinarily creative, which it was, and a sense of freedom. But Steve was my first ever paying client. But as well as running a club, he had a day job. And that's the other thing I always have. Yes, you can do whatever you want to please. If you want to grow radishes as your career, fine. I picked that. But you have to have the day job too. And so he had the day job and he worked in a clothing shop called PX. And they just moved from one area of Covent Garden to another. And they were using the ground floor, but they weren't using the basement. And the basement was about the size of this A4 piece of paper. And it was really too small for clothing, but it was just big enough to have a tiny little hat shop. And within a year of leaving college, I had my own little hat shop there. And I had no real business plan. I had no real workroom, but I'd made a load of lovely hats. And my friend Kim left college to come and work with me. And I opened this shop on the 1st of October, 1980. And my friends invited about 250 people to the opening. You could probably fit like 8 people in there at a squeeze.
Everyone was outside.
Down one wooden staircase with no fire escape.
Of course.
but thank God it was a nice day, and there's a pub just down the street. 250 people didn't turn up. I don't know, 150 did. Anyway, it was a great evening. And so that was really my first breakout by myself. And again, it was with the help of other people. You know, you can do something, but you have to have other people's support, because they can sort of expand your work.
Yep.
And when you're working all hours that God sends, they can help communicate the message.
Absolutely. And I suppose that after a while the work's speaking for itself, and there's a sense of, I don't know, a word of mouth, if you will, and things are spreading, you know, with that kind of, you know, support and that network. And I suppose it's a community in itself, isn't it, that's traveling around. So you've opened in, you know, as you said, 1980, which is such a, now it's actually funny. I find that now when we talk about the 80s, I mean, I'm a child of the 80s in the sense that, you know, I was born in 86, and I remember being in the 90s, and the 80s were almost kind of like a dirty word once, but I was always quite obsessed. Also just because my mother was obsessed with, you know, Dynasty and Dallas and the fashion and the excess and things like that. But I mean, what was that like, you know, Covent Garden, being in that buzz, you know, what did that mean sort of for you?
Well, for us, it was very different. We were coming out of the 1970s, which was all the miners' strike, Britain doing incredibly badly. And the reason that we started up as a sort of group of friends and I started off doing our own thing, because we felt that we had to do our own thing, that the previous generation wasn't what we were about, and we had to be original in our own way. Not that the previous generation wasn't relevant, but so much had gone wrong. And it was the beginning of Thatcherism and all of that. So much had gone wrong that really we had to make it our own way. And also, it sounds a bit ridiculous to say, we weren't doing it for the money. We were doing it for the sort of creativity and trying to prove ourselves. I mean, I think we were doing it a bit for the money, but just to try and make it. That's what we were just trying to work out what we wanted to do, because we didn't really know. We felt as though we were like stepping in you know, into the dark, or you know, off the edge of a bridge or something into the great abyss. We didn't know what was going to happen to us, because on one side you had all the city boys wearing red braces and making a million by the time they're 25.
Yeah.
And on the other, and then you had Dynasty, so you had all these things of wealth and glamour and everything. You had that, but it was also at that time we were sort of rediscovering poetry. We were listening to Lena Horne. We were finding, you know, old records, beautiful paint. We were looking back as well as looking towards the future. So it was really a mixed up culture. Also, I think what was really different about then is we really enjoyed London's multiculturalism, that people from, it seemed to be a meeting place for people from all over the world, people from every country, of all colors, and that's what made it really vibrant, and we really celebrated that. It was a really important thing to us, because I know that when, say for example, we once did a fashion show in Paris, and we realized that even Paris was not like that. And then eventually you go to New York and we realized that America was not like that. But London, for both good and bad reasons, seemed to be really mixed up, and that's what we loved about it. I mean, you know, of course, it's not perfect at all,
No.
but it's sort of got hopes in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, I think there's so much parallels actually in terms of kind of what we're seeing right now with, I suppose, you know, in this sort of digital social media age, there is a lot of young people who are looking to find their own way. There's a lot of startups because they've been a little
Sure.
disillusioned with the decade before and what that has meant, whilst also still using that reverence of, like, you know, never before have we actually seen so much, well, not never before, but we're seeing so many references. And actually what I find is quite endearing is that there are so many people who are having all these references from the 90s and the 80s, and they actually don't even realize how much of what they're doing now is so built on what was, you know, coming from before, and which is really beautiful in a lot of ways. And I love, you know, personally, I'm a fan of, you know, that education of those references. I dress in references, I speak in references when it comes to, you know, making sense and context of the world and how I'd like to live in it. And it's a really nice way to kind of see people sort of forging, you know, making their way with those references. What is your typical sort of design process, you know, when you're thinking of a new piece or a new collection? You know, how does that work?
Yeah. Well, I sort of live my life and put it into a hat. It's quite simple. They're quite autobiographical in a funny way. So every season is a theme, and, you know, it can be a film, it can be traveling to Japan, it can be, I mean, for example, I've just been doing this winter's collection, which was called French Kiss. I'd never done a collection about Paris and my work in Paris. I spent half my life there, it seems to be, or more. But I'd never actually done anything about, you know, France, said he, wearing I just realized. I'm living the dream. So that was very much about reverence, and I'm going to be doing an exhibition in France, and then there's another one which is coming up for next year, my next year's collection, which is called Bon Vacances, which is for next summer, which is, funny enough, based on a little booklet my parents had in the early 60s, which was basically to get Anglo-Saxons to go to France and spend money on holidays. I mean, just like now. I mean, it's so funny, things that, I mean, over the past few days are completely repeating themselves. And of course, this little booklet had pictures of, you know, bottles of wine, Brigitte Bardot in a bikini on the beach in Saint-Tropez, and all these things, which is still so endearing. So I've done a collection based on that. So inspiration can really come from a conversation, or from friends, you know, how a friend dresses. It's always, there's always a logic to it, even if it only makes sense to me. Yeah. And hopefully within that, it spins off some lovely hats that people can wear. But, you know, people wear hats for very specific occasions. Sometimes people wear hats for every day. Sometimes they wear them for the races. Sometimes they wear them for a wedding. If they're spending a lot of money on a hat, it tends to be for an occasion, whatever that occasion is going to be. And of course, it's been somewhat quiet, certainly over the past year. I mean, last year there was, I normally make a lot of hats for weddings, and I worked on one wedding last year, and that was outside in the south of France with 10 people. Wow. Yeah. In a huge garden, and everybody was socially distancing about 5 meters, actually. And there were only younger people there, nobody over 35 went. So, but this year, all of a sudden, it's been very busy, not for people going to weddings, but for brides, because people saved up for, you know, put it off for 1 year, but they're not going to put it off for 2 years or 3 years. Not if they're young marrieds and want to have children and all of that, you know. I mean, it's more important to tie the knot, I guess. So, it's actually been quite busy now.
Yeah, that's great. And I've been seeing, actually, now that you say it, I have been seeing so many women who are really doing hats as part of the look, especially if they're having slightly smaller weddings, more city weddings, kind of more non-traditional, if you will. I've been seeing hats everywhere, and I've been, you know, hats and gloves, actually. living for it, because you know there's something about a hat that brings a sense of occasion. I think it, you know, in the way that maybe a sunglass or a shoe, you know, it kind of polishes off, it finishes off an outfit, and it's actually great to kind of see that reintroduced back into bridal wear.
Yeah, I mean, and also the fact of the matter is, you know, we could, I mean, with all the jokes on the internet about it, you know, everybody's got a smart top on and is naked from the waist to waist down. Of course, we're fully dressed. But, you know, you don't see your shoes, you see what you've got on your head.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm wearing a grey jumper. You're wearing a white t-shirt,
Yeah.
but we've both got hats on, so we're working a look.
Yeah, it's so true. And I have to always find that I used, you know, I would go to say, you know, like certain house parties and things like that, and if I think, oh, I've got to take my shoes off, funny enough, I'd always like try to compensate with a headpiece, because like you said, I was like, well, I don't have anything else to kind of finish off, so I'm all neck up.
Well, a hat or anything on it, whether it's a little fascinator or a jewel or a comb or something like that, is so transformative.
Yeah.
Because in a way, yes, it is unusual, but it's attached to your head. So anything that you put on your head, it's like your hair, it's really you. Yeah. Clothes are something very much that you apply to yourself, but a hat somehow becomes you, or you become the hat, or it depends how you interpret it. You know, so often people come to me, I mean, in normal times, and say, oh, well, you know, the first thing they will do is they say, I'm not a hat wearer. I don't have the confidence. And what I try and explain to them, the hat will give them the confidence and they can sort of relax underneath it. You know, the hat can do the talking for them.
I completely agree.
And then they can sort of, you know, I say, oh, thank you very much, or something like that. And they've made that communication. So a hat's a great sort of costume in a way. And I mean, even really great hat wearers like the late Isabella Blow or Anna Piaggi, you know, would wear hats because they're part of their sort of armor. You know, they do the work, they did the work for them.
Sure.
But, you know, hats can be a beanie on a Monday morning taking the kids to school.
Yeah, exactly.
And that completely is valid. You know, it's so funny when you look back at fashion magazines, people imagine that in the 50s or whatever, everybody was wearing a broad brim hat with a veil on it, with a tightly folded umbrella. No, they were wearing a beret because they were, you know, running for a bus. Yep. But in fashion magazines, it was something different, just the same as it is now.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So at what stage did you, you know, working with other ready-to-wear designers and such, and at what stage did that start? Who was your, you know, the first brand that you worked with?
Really early on. I've been going about 3 or 4 years, and it started with working with 2 designers in the same season. The first person to actually ask me was Jasper Conran.
Oh, wow.
And Jasper asked me to collaborate, and it was his 3rd ever fashion show. And I made some hats for him, and that was great. And then, but he was sort of relatively unknown. I mean, people knew he came from a famous family, and Terence Conran and Habitat and all of that. But I was asked by Zandra Rhodes, who I knew, friends of friends of friends. And she asked me to make some hats for her, and we collaborated on that. But also it was through contacts, and people always say to me, well, how do I get ahead? I say, you know, you have to go to everything. And I have absolutely no regrets about my career whatsoever. I mean, what's the point? But I would say that I turned down too many invitations because I was at work. And what I didn't actually realize, that getting out there, networking, socializing, that was sort of as important as coming up with the next design. I mean, so be it, you know, fine, whatever. But I would advise people now that, yeah, I mean, it's not only who you know, what you know, but it is about contacts. And I think now, even more so, putting yourself out in the world. It used to be whether you were in Elle magazine or Vogue magazine. Now, not to say those things aren't important or lovely to have, but there's a whole side of social networking and networks like this, which are as important, if not more important.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much power in that. And you never know who you're going to meet at what opportunity with what they might be working on. Or, you know, sometimes you just start these kind of conversations or what you don't even know are going to be friendships or working relationships that actually end up doing like spectacular things. So it's always great to just to be open to having those conversations in the first place. And like you said, always saying sort of, you know, attending things and going there. And, you know, I think sometimes I think networking is quite an intimidating process for some, but sometimes it's like, you know, I always used to go to certain events and I'd go by myself a lot, and I'd always go, okay, at least if you talk to one person or if you exchange a contact with one person, it might not do anything, but just in case. And I find that it's always so it's just like yourself, it's been such a great way for me to kind of, you know, work and do the career that I do, because of that kind of mantra of just being like, just talk to at least one person, even though you feel much shy or something like that.
And the weird thing is, and this happens really as you get older, you realize that, I mean, you start to realize that in a weird way, even London's a small place.
Yeah.
And everybody sort of has connections, and you start to talk to somebody and they know this person. Oh, and we worked with Selfridges then. And then 5 years later, you meet them again. I always say, be nice to everybody, because sooner or later you're going to be working for them or sitting next to them at dinner.
All the time. I say exactly the same thing. I'm always just like, be nice to everyone, because you know. When I first started personal shopping, I remember working in Topshop, and it was all of a sudden becoming, you know, when you're young, you go out and you're always socializing. And then I started to realize someone might come into my shopping room and it might be someone I've done some, you know, so I started to go, it was a real wake-up call of this idea, you never know who's going to come through the door.
Yeah.
Because it's so small. So, you know, it really changed that outlook in terms of, you know, how we treat everyone at all times, and always trying to give, you know, benefit of the doubt and kind of putting your, you know, your professional foot forward, because you just never know. And it's so true. And it comes up time and time again. I'm sure they'll, you know, bumping into someone who you thought you'd never see again in like 4 years. They're like, oh, don't I know you from?
Oh yeah, all the time, really all the time. And if you don't recognize them, it's probably because your memory is gone.
Yeah. And do you find working, as you've worked with so many different designers, you know, you mentioned that you're doing an exhibition with Dior, for example, does your process seem to change, or do they kind of trust your process because they know your work? You know, how does it work with the collaborations?
You know, fashion is this crazy thing. It has to reinvent itself every 6 months or every 3 months. So you don't start at 0, but you don't start at 10. You start at about 1.5. Okay. So when I'm taking hats out of the box to show Maria Grazia Chiuri or Tom Brown or Marc Jacobs, you know, my heart is in my mouth. Is it? Are they going to like it or not? Okay. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And you very quickly realize if they don't, because, you know, you're working together as a team. So even though, yes, the hat's got my name on it, or it's got the name of Christian Dior on it, we have to work together as a team. There's no way that we can't. So for me as well, being the hat maker, I'm supposed to be the jolly one. So when they've all been working in the studio very hard on the ready to wear, and all ready to either keel over or rip each other's throats out, you know, like, you know, I can come in and make everybody happy.
Right.
So that's my sort of purpose. I remember once saying to Pat McGrath, the makeup artist, fabulous makeup artist, I said, Pat, you're like the most famous makeup artist in the world. You do so many fashion shows. You've got your own brand, which turns over billions, and, you know, all of this. How do you do it? And I said, what's the secret of like doing that makeup? And she said, turn up on time and keep smiling. But what about the makeup? She said, well, you have to be a good makeup artist as well, but the most important thing to be on time and be nice to people. And then the world works well.
So simple,
so simple. You know, it's what our parents told us: be nice to people, be polite to people, and it's the truth.
I absolutely agree. I think there's been so many examples actually that you can sort of know people who are absolutely fabulous, wonderful at what they do, and then when you're sort of thinking, and you know, and I've come across this time and time again where if they're not necessarily, like you said, as the nicest or the jolliest, or you know, that can actually hinder a lot of things, and it doesn't mean that they're not good at what they do. And actually, so yes, you do have to be very talented at what you do, but that sort of disposition of being pleasant and nice and everything is really goes a hell of a lot of the
and also I think it's sometimes we forget. I mean, I know there's a lot of personal shoppers and people in this world who may be watching this, but you know, we do it as a profession, especially if you're a personal shopper. You're often working with somebody who's like got a lot of money, or they're sort of slightly in the spotlight, maybe within their own village, or maybe on a world stage. It doesn't really matter. And they feel as though they're supposed to know about how they're supposed to look.
Right.
That they feel as though they should automatically know that, but they realize they don't, which is why they're coming to you. So they're a bit nervous. They need helping. They need an education. So just being nice and gentle with them is a huge part of the job, because they will rarely admit that they don't know.
Yes.
But they don't. And maybe you have to be that very clever art of suggesting something to them in a way that they think it's their idea as opposed to your idea.
Absolutely.
But that's why you're personal shoppers, because you can do that.
Yeah. You start to weave in and out of a behavior, and I always sort of say, you know, half of being a personal shopper is being a bit of a therapist at the same time, and being a behavioral psychologist. You know, you've got to pick up on the cues and the social sort of mannerisms and kind of work with it, you know, for that success, and to always have a happy customer. So, you know, speaking of working with people in the spotlight, this is obviously something you're very accustomed to. Who was your sort of first, if you will, sort of big name or person in the spotlight that you worked with?
The first person, I mean, really in the spot, I mean, I worked with people before they were famous, because there were a lot of singers like Steve Strange or Boy George, George O'Dowd before it became Boy George, and Duran. I mean, lots of bands. I worked with them.
Amazing.
And also somebody like Sandra Rhodes, who I made hats for personally. But really, the fairly early on in my career, and I mean, still a huge influence to everybody, is Diana, Princess of Wales, who I started to make hats for in about 86, I think it was, 85, 86. I made quite a few hats for her, often for her personal life as opposed to her public events. So they were often more sort of casual things like berets or caps or things to wear on holiday, as opposed to wearing something for Ascot. So she was really the first person. And I mean, I pinched myself then. And
when you get the call, what's that like?
I had a call, and I was told there was an important customer. That was all I knew.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
And bring a selection of hats. And I went into a designer's showroom, and nobody else was there. And then out of the fitting room by herself was Diana, Princess of Wales.
My goodness.
Yes. And so that was amazing. And she was lovely and charming, and good fun too. And this was not right at the beginning of her marriage, but fairly early on. So she was learning the ropes. She was learning about fashion too.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a nice journey, isn't it? You know, when you have those types of customers or relationships where it's like a journey together. So you kind of
yeah. And certain people have really taken that. I mean, for example, somebody like Kylie Minogue, I made some hats for her when she first came to Britain from Australia in the late 80s, and I still make hats for her now. Yeah. So, or even somebody like Rihanna, I made hats for her when she was 18, and I make hats for her now. And it's funny, stylists come and go, and I come in the room and it's like, Stephen! Because I'm a face they recognise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there any stylists that you've, specifically that you love to work with, or you've worked with in the past that have really made a huge impression with you?
I can't say that. That's really like naming my favorite child. You
I
know,
suppose
like,
it is actually. Coming for you tomorrow.
yes. I'll see you tomorrow. Favorite stuff. I mean, there've been so many over the years. I mean, for example, Lucinda Chambers, who was fashion director of British Vogue for a long time, was great. Edward Enninful, who is now fashion editor of British Vogue, who I've known for years and years and years, and a good friend of Pat McGrath's. Who else? So many. Debbie Mason, who used to be on Al. Yeah, so many. And you know, of course, all the newer ones as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you guys have any questions, please start sending those in now. I mean, for you, Stephen, what's been your, you know, over the years, you know, what are your sort of key learns that you found, you know, that you would absolutely sort of, you know, tell your students or, you know, tell people who you collaborate with?
I think you have to love it, because at 4 a.m, when it's all going wrong, it's important you still love it as opposed to resenting it. Of course, there is resentment and love. It's in this very fine balance. But let's hope we push love up.
More love.
We need more love. And that's been a really important thing. Also, you can't do it by yourself. You need a group of people with you to help you, to support you, an understanding partner. You know, probably very important. What else? Remember, it's supposed to be fun.
Right.
Really important, because sometimes it isn't. But you have to remember that maybe you're one of the very lucky people who have chosen what they want to do. And it's a privilege. So don't treat it flippantly and have fun doing it. Because, you know, if you're in a good mood, you will put people in a good mood as well. I mean, maybe they'll find you slightly annoying.
Okay.
But fine. But, you know, you'll get back what you give out.
Yeah. That's
absolutely, I see it time and time again. If you're nervous, you'll make people nervous. So, and sometimes you have to be a good actor.
Oh, absolutely. Fake it till you make it is a saying that people say, but I'm like, honestly, it's so true. You know, you could be having crisis everywhere, and actually being really positive, or finding just the comedy, you know, that idea of comedy and tragedy, sort of, you know, finding that sometimes is the thing that's going to pull you through every time. Because you have to go through, you're going to get through it, but it's how you sort of attack it, I suppose, in the moment is going to be the really telling part, and how it weighs on you or your team, those around you.
No, absolutely. What else have I learned? I mean, I think the most, have fun. I mean, we're dealing with fashion and frocks and, you know, how to look great. I mean, everything else can be miserable. So, but it's really important. And, you know, even people can have not much. One thing they can normally change is their appearance.
Really?
So no matter where they're from, no matter how much money they've got, that's something which is so magical about what we do. So magical.
Opportunity to kind of, you know, if you want to be somebody else for that day, if you want to project something else that day, what an opportunity to do that different.
Yes, I mean, I make some of the most expensive hats in the world, which are the most luxurious, using the most gorgeous handmade materials. I have to tell you that this beret, we haven't rehearsed this, by the way, this beret is $3 off the internet from China. And I love it. Because I've lost all my black berets, I said to Monica, who I work with, I'd love to find a black beret, and she surprised me, and it's great.
And here you are. I love it.
And it's so nylon-y. Long after I'm dust, this is just going to look exactly the same. I can leave this in my will to somebody.
Isn't it great? Well, maybe Monica will have it.
Maybe Monica will have it, That's very true.
We have a couple of questions here for you from one of our members here. Who is your ultimate hat muse?
Ultimate hat muse. I think it has to be Dita Von Teese.
Really?
Who's
Wow.
a client. She's amazing because she can come in and put on any hat in the shop. I mean, she knows the world of costume. You know, she's from the Midwest. I mean, her mother is completely beautiful. I mean, she looks like her older sister. And, you know, it's in the genes, obviously. But, you know, she's a normal girl. But she puts on, she has her hair done, she puts on her makeup, she puts on a little hat, and she becomes Dita Von Teese. So in the same way, she can come into our shop and put on a baseball cap, and she puts it on the back of her head in a cheeky angle and slaps her thigh and says, hey, where's the next party? You know, it's great. And she has fun doing it. Yeah. So I think she's a great muse, and, you know, she's wonderful. I mean, and at the other end of the spectrum, who's a wonderful muse? Her Majesty the Queen.
Lovely.
I mean, who looks better in a hat?
Yeah.
Fantastic. She looks like her. It looks like fashion too, but she looks completely like her. Yep. Who else could wear a fluorescent green, large brimmed hat with a matching coat? I mean, incredible, and get away with it.
Yes. It's so true. I do love a hat on the Queen. Another question here we have is, could you tell us of, have you got anything exciting coming in the next few months?
Well, yeah, I'm working on 2 exhibitions at the moment. Dior, Designer of Dreams, which was at the Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris, and then it came to London 2 years ago, and it was at the V&A, is opening in Brooklyn in New York. And I'm going over to dress the hats, and I'm creating some special hats for it. And also in New York at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I am doing headdresses for their next exhibition, which is called America, Lexicon of Fashion. So they're asking this Brit to go over work out. I mean, I think they're going to find out that I'm not American and should be working on a normal American show, but I won't be wearing a beret. Maybe I'm wearing a cowboy hat.
Maybe. Very,
Maybe the accent won't be very convincing. Better start working on that.
That's very exciting. And
so working on that, but you know, the weird thing is that sometimes people say to me, so what have you got coming up? What's the most exciting thing is the next collection.
Yeah.
That's actually the most exciting thing. You know, to pin pieces of fabric together. I'll just show you something.
Please do.
So everywhere I go, I have this little wooden head which I take with me.
Okay.
So I pin on bits of paper or flowers or a twig or something like that, and then I sketch it. And so this is hats all the time, or I'm literally sketching on the back of an envelope. So yes, that in a way, that's the most exciting thing. That's my first love. A lot of the time, of course, I'm running a business, and an employer, and traveling, and getting my next COVID test. Well, all those things of modern life. But it's, yeah, there's always things in the pipeline. Yeah, always things in the pipeline. And lots of things I can't talk about.
Well, we'll just have to stay tuned, won't we?
Stay tuned. Yeah. I just did a great thing last weekend, which has been on my Instagram, about the Beatles. I made hats for the statues of the Beatles in Liverpool.
Fantastic.
And I themed it with each of them represented a song. Each Beatles had a song. Paul McCartney had Penny Lane, because it was written about Penny Lane, and that was where my school was when I was growing up. So I know it extremely well. I knew the barber and the banker and the lady selling poppies that he talks about in the song. And then George wrote Here Comes the Sun. And so he had a big sun on his head. And what else? Ringo had a yellow submarine.
Of course.
Yeah. And then John Lennon had a big sign, like a stop sign, which said help, and he was sort of bursting out of it. So that was a great thing. And they're going to be showing them. They take them out at the weekends only, and then redress the sculptures. They're in the Museum of Liverpool, which is just next to them. So,
Oh, that's amazing.
that's been a big project.
Well, it's been amazing speaking with you, Stephen. We've just come to the end of our talk, but it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us and to kind of give us an insight into you know, your work and how you've sort of managed to have such a successful career. It's wonderfly fascinating. I could do it for hours.
Yeah, and you have to be lucky. You have to be lucky, but you can make your own luck too.
Yeah, and you know what, I've done a few of these with some sort of designers and things like that, jewelry designers. I'm not the first person to actually say that, in terms of that, you know, sometimes it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but the luck also comes into it. And I think it's, you know, seizing that opportunities and kind of, you know, saying yes and kind of working with it, hiding away from it makes all the difference. But thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Same to you.
I hope you have a brolly and start shucking down now.
Yes, a brolly and a sun lounger, I think.
Exactly, but both at all times. But again, yeah, thank you so much, Stephen. It's been wonderful, and thank you for joining us, ŌNCE Club members and guests. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks, Dorothy. Bye. Bye.